everyone. I'm JP, and I'm a host of this Mata Talk. This is a session that we want to talk about data in the media industry and actually understand what the real challenges are. Data actually has a lot of different use cases, a bunch of use cases in our industry. So thought it would be interesting to invite over Sean McCarthy this time to be part of our panel as a special guest because of his current job at YouTube, because of his previous experience at Paramount, and also because he's an advisor to hydraulics. Sorry, so made a lot of sense. These sessions are being recorded and are going to be part of the SVTA University content too. So they should be published. Thanks, David, for that. And Agus.
Okay.
So, David, you proposed this topic. So why do you think it's important? Give us maybe your first minute of thoughts on why this was a hot topic.
Data is knowledge. Knowledge allows us to adapt, make right decisions, and to hopefully learn from both the past and the present when you have real-time data. Everything we do comes down to something that needs to be measured, adjusted, and all of our systems and at these massive scale levels especially are meant to be driven by this. And now with the continued evolution of AI tooling and so forth, it's interesting to see what gets opened up. Even 10 years ago, everything was being driven by Conviva and a number of other analytics platforms and so forth too to help us get there, just from live event perspective. And it's been interesting to see how things have evolved, and I really wanted to hear what people had to say around this as well, because it is such a critical part of what we do. Yes, we're all about delivering, these cool experiences and video and audio and connecting people to the content that they care about. But data is largely how we get it done in the end, and it's interesting to see where we are, where we're headed, and where we've been.
I mean, we benchmark everything with data, right? It's how we anchor our sort of measurements of success. So, one thing that's interesting about Google, I mean, it's a data-driven company like a lot of others, but every business outcome has its metric, and that could be a technical system, a business system, a process, a people process system. So you need data to create those metrics. You need raw data. Data is not only useful on the technology side, which I think the group here will probably dive pretty deep into, at least I'm hoping we do, but also just to up level conversations to drive business impact. That's what a lot of my time spent doing now. So it's trying to justify getting some more granular data so that we can create more impactful business metrics. But yeah, I think everyone understands the value of data. So looking forward to the discussion.
How about you, Connie? We were talking the other day and you said that this is definitely a hot topic for you at the moment. So maybe you can share us your view on it.
Right. We all want data. We want as much data as we can, and then we want them as fast as we can. Right. And then we want to be able to keep them for as long as we can for any post-event or assessments or our content security team comes and say, hey, that super popular episode that you just aired 3 weeks ago, we got notified there's fraud or pirates, right? Well, all of that is hugely tied to cost, right? So content providers, we have this huge challenge on how do we balance cost versus the amount of data, the speed of the data, as well as for how long we're going to keep them. And then once we get the data, right, we have pipeline that ingest and normalize and store. And it depends on what scenario you are using the data for. That's a lot of compute power you're going to be using to do whatever you need to do with them, right? That could be content steering. That could be pirate anomaly detection. It could be numbers of things, right? So these are all the things that seriously are keeping me up at night. And I'm coming from a meeting for that. I'm going to a meeting after this. So yeah.
How about you, Casey? You're also sending a lot of data, I can imagine.
Yeah, actually, I'm actually doing data runs in the background, which you can't see at the moment, on a problematic TV. And it's an interesting thing that a large part of at least my job, and I'm sure other video player developers' jobs, is data. The player itself is the point that the data comes from. As far as not only the what are they watching, was the show popular, or those types of things, but all of the debugging analytics, which is what I'm actually using right now. It's a crucial player in that, to where like we'll see things like if I change the timing of when an event comes out from the player, like the Seek event, you could get a call from an analytics guy that's like latency went up, like something's wrong, something's broken. So like every little code change gets amplified, because it's sort of the entry point for all the data into those backend systems. So we use it a lot. I'm actually using it right now to, like we're trying to experiment with different playback engines. And so in order to justify that this engine is better than the other one, I have to have data to back that up, and I have to be able to show all the different metrics and that kind of thing. So especially for me in the past couple of months, it has been a huge part of my life, just as far as the collection side of things.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to pose a question. So Connie said something that I firmly believe, but I would argue it's actually not a universally sort of agreed upon way of looking at data, and that is we all want real-time data, as much data as possible, retained as long as possible. I actually get a lot of pushback from that
When's
internally.
too much, right? And the cost with that.
The right amount, and why do you really need it real time? Is only a subset of it actually valuable in real time? What are you going to do with it in real time? Because there's adds huge cost and complexity to the data pipelines. I'm still of the mindset that most of the time, real time, high granular, high volume data is necessary for stream debugging, anyways, for QoE context, not so much for a BI context. But what are your thoughts on that? Like everyone.
Since I was put on the spot by JP and been added to this crew, I've been writing some questions down to ask you guys as well too. And that was question number one, which is knowing that the budgets are small, where do you spend your money? I think to tie on, Sean, to your questions, do you spend the money on the speed of the compute in order to do any kind of action right away if you need to, or do you spend your money on the volume of data that you have to capture so you can look at it later on? What's more important? What's a higher value? What's a higher return on investment for that spend?
It depends on the scenario that you want to support. Right now, if cost is not a thing, right? Then we don't mind. Like for me, like when one of my vendor came to me, right? Because we made requests. For example, CloudFront only has CMCD supports on real-time log. They don't have it in standard log, right? So we made a feature request support to have them support CMCD in standard log, and then they came to me and say, if we are willing to negotiate pricing, would you be willing to consume real-time log for that purpose? Well, yeah, right? Now, as much data as possible, it is up to me to decide when I'm ingesting and normalizing the data, what I want, right? So for live event QoE, especially high profile live event, right? And we'll dial up the knob, right? And then spend a lot more power. We want to make sure that if there's any action we need to do in terms of CDN switching, or even one day, maybe even original encoder switching, we want to do it ASAP. Now, other scenarios that I have, right? If I have a contractual security requirement, and right, that hey, you need to be able to act upon and identify malicious stream within X amount of time, and that's minutes, right? Then for that duration of the event, then we had to dial up everything. Now, dollar is a thing, right? So all the other BI, right? Usage reporting, all of that can be on standard log.
So
That's the first evaluation we do. Yeah.
question there. So, yeah, I think the pattern of the needing a real time data feed really comes back to like feedback loops, like we said. Are we going to action on the data in real time, switch CDNs, change it in code, what have you? Yes, I think that's pretty straightforward. But one thing I'm curious is when it comes to requirements, like contractual requirements, contractual obligations, like on security side of the house, are you guys really seeing content owners stipulate things like you need to take action, you need to take down a stream or enforce some sort of takedown notice in minutes? Because that's something that a couple years ago was weaved into very few contracts. It was mostly European soccer league, football leagues that I saw. And I thought that was going to be a trend, but I've not actually heard about that being contractually stipulated.
It is in one of my contractual obligations right now.
Yeah,
there's a lot of gray area that we are getting additional clarity because like to go down to the technical details because we're nerds here, right? So if I need to revoke a session, right, I can send a signal to my CDN partners. I'm going to revoke this token, but it also takes time for the CDNs to replicate all that down to their edge pops, right? So there's always going to be a levels of gray area. And also, how do they know? There's no data that we can legitimately confirm and go like, unless we really spend a lot of money to like, when did this session first started? Because it takes us time to whack-a-mole, right? To identify, okay, this might be a malicious session, and then we have to train our model to identify what is the right threshold.
Connie, some of those SLAs that stipulate, response time in minutes, are those generally associated with live content, live events, or are you seeing the same kind of requirements and expectations for VOD?
Live event, definitely not entertainment VOD, right? Entertainment VOD, what I'm pushing for is because they're downloaded once and it's gone forever. Right? So what I'm pushing for now is let's treat those like a live event. So let's identify this is a premiere of a high profile VOD episodes or movie, usually episodes, right? And then during the episode premiere, plus some buffer amount of time, let's treat that like a live event. And we'll turn on everything. So we ensure that nobody else will have this content available before we do, right? And then after that, we turn it off. Now, if the full event replay, I basically just went back to our product team and it's like, there's no value for us to do this. And they
And that's, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I noticed something similar back in the Paramount days. The way we think about piracy anyways at YouTube's quite different in that it's a free product most of the time, so it's a little bit different. But going back to the days at Paramount, it was interesting because there was a desire to identify bad actors in real time, and we built a platform and some very sophisticated metrics around surfacing those vectors of piracy in real time. But what we found was driving most of the business decisions related to content security was actually not so much on the real time, but on the replays of live events. And specifically, it was like geo-blocking concerns more than anything else. It wasn't necessarily, it was the bypassing of geo restrictions. And that actually is an easier problem to solve than some of the others, related to like, deep linking and, stream ripping, hosting your own manifest server. We found ways of surfacing those types of, pirated behaviors too. But something as simple as geo-blocking is actually what drove most of the discussion, because you buy the rights to stream a piece of content in one, particular geo, and then the content owners come after you when someone in a different country is able to view it. So that's what I saw driving most of the discussion, and it was on the event replays as well as the live events. probably because different time zones in the other countries.
And that kind of data analysis doesn't really matter if you're not looking for volume, you're just looking for the needle in the haystack then.
Yeah. And
So it's definitely, I'm seeing some different like use cases or scenarios for data so far. And I think we haven't heard you, Alex, on like what data has meant for you or means to you nowadays. And also want to listen to Bhavesh's perspective, because I'm seeing different angles here. Some is real-time data, like war room kind of scenarios, security, for triage or debugging, you said, Casey, for decision making. So I'm hearing different like business decision making. I'm hearing different use cases. Anything else you want to add, maybe Alex? Because you also probably you made a lot of decisions based on data in the past or nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like my experience at Hulu and WBD, like most of my experience with data and things where I relied on data had to do with playback QoE metrics, business usage metrics, right? So what's being watched, how long it's being watched, and so on. And then also I would say logging of like device capabilities, so reporting like what the various devices are capable of, so we know like what kind of media to send to those devices, and also so we can plan things like, oh hey, how many devices out there are ready to even accept like AV1 codec, or like whatever next codec is down the line, right? So that was kind of my experience. But thinking about the question that Sean asked earlier about is real-time data really that important? In my experience, like the primary distinction was had to do with the type of content, right? So what is it, live or is it bot? And my experience at Hulu, where for example we were doing both live linear channels and live events, and then also SVOD, was that if we're talking about SVOD, like generally like the customer, like the user expectations tend to be a little bit lower when it comes to for example playback failing, right? So if they try to play something and for whatever reason they're not able to, right, whether it's a back-end issue or a app issue, they'll go try to play something else, right? Like they'll find something else to watch. Whereas like with live events, typically, like if they want to watch a football game that's starting right now and they can't play it, like they are going to be upset and they're going to leave the app and look for alternatives somewhere else, right? They're not just going to go, oh, let me watch something else on the service, right? They're going to just leave the service. And so I think that ends up driving then a much quicker, like a need to respond to those type of incidents much quicker, right? So the importance of real-time data, I think, for live events and tracking QoE and QoS metrics is much higher than for SVOD.
Well, and I think there's a couple different cases on that too. I mean, there's quality versus quantity, and sometimes we have to take the quantity and then process it, compute to get the quality, and that's a big challenge, and it's a cost barrier, and then that also is a time barrier, right? What do I need really quickly? What do I need to be able to act on right now? What do I need to be able to have after action debugging? Because if there's a problem, I want all the data so I can really understand what happened, so I can make sure it never happens again. And I might not be able to do that right now during the event, but after the fact, whether that's player and combining that with CMCD and CDN logs and everything else that we can bring together, plus our our real-time data that was actually going on for player stats and so forth, it becomes a challenge. And it's one of those things like, well, if something goes wrong, I want a lot of data. But if everything goes right, maybe I didn't need as much data. And that, I think, really is the point down to quality of data. And that's been a challenge, I think, in the past that maybe we can improve. Things like CMCD v2 are definitely going to help with, the amount of data that you need to get and how you get it to theoretically improve cost and process, right? Where else can we also get really big improvements is an interesting one that we'll have to see.
So I had 2 points. Going back to your earlier, I think Bhavesh's earlier question, or no, it was yours, JP, about the requirements. One of the things that was not mentioned are legal requirements, like how long can you legally hold on to this data or the customer's data? Because it's essentially customer data. It's your data as a company, as a publisher, but it's also you're capturing information about the user or the customer. So how long legally can you hold on to data? That needs to be considered in the cost factor as well. The other thing is going back to use cases. No one brought up ads, so let me be the ads guy here. For ads, especially for a live event, you do need real-time access to large amounts of data so that you can see and count the beacons that are being fired, whether or not the ad server is actually getting all the ad requests or the ads are actually being played, and now you can count that ad as revenue or how much revenue you're losing. That is one of the biggest use cases we had at Disney, is especially during a live event. Did the ad actually bring down the stream, to Alex's point? Because yeah, if it's third quarter and things are getting tight and that stream goes down because of ad play, nobody wants to see the ad in the first place. So we need to know what ad actually caused the failure, and we need to take that ad down so it doesn't degrade the stream any further. And the information is in multiple different places, not only the CDN, but also we're looking at Conviva metrics. We're looking at our backend data stores to see, so there's different pools of data that we need to bring together. So I'd be interested in seeing how you guys aggregate your data and then do your analysis on top of it.
So I'll take a stab at that from my perspective. There's two points you raised, right? One is around compliance, data compliance, where you're storing data, how long, PII, all of that. Then the other is around the ad use case. I find it interesting on the ad use case that you require real time at Disney. I think that's good if people are watching. My big question would be like, okay, so an ad didn't fire. Most of the ad reporting I've seen done on like large events, they'll like look at the data the next day, say like, what was their ad revenue? How many impressions did they drive? Et cetera. So I'm curious, like what specific ad data matters in real time and what you do about it. But generally,
I think, yeah, Sarge's example was a bad ad that caused a massive drop in viewer usage because it broke something.
If you rerun that ad,
And
sure,
you can drop again.
That's just one use case.
So,
John, I'll answer your question.
a content issue at that point, or is it an ad issue? Is I guess what I'm saying, is it the ad server you're pulling, or is it the content?
we asked this.
We're looking at the actual ad itself, not the ad server. The ad server's already made its decision and given to the DAI whatever the ad load is. Now is it the ad failed? The asset failed at the CDN. The asset corrupted the player because the player couldn't play whatever that asset was. Another use case we had is if it's a big game and there's a huge sponsor, if an executive sees a slate, that means the ad did not play. So we need to know. We get calls like, why did I get slate? It's like, well, what device are you watching on? Give us more context to give us your data so we can go look and see what happened in the stream. So like if the exec didn't get the ad, but maybe our ops team did see the ad, then now it's the needle in the haystack.
Right. Yeah. So
not only a failure doesn't have to be catastrophic where the stream stops playing or the player crashes. A failure in an ad standpoint is the ad not actually playing, so no one's getting paid on that spot. So that could be the slate is shown, or the game content, or the whatever's behind the stream is actually playing through instead of the actual ad in that spot.
And I think one of the differences there is that when you look at the graph of viewer utilization throughout the day, you're probably looking at the peak concurrency for good live events. So therefore, the ad calls that are happening right there have a much larger financial impact than an ad call in the middle of the night when you've got, a much smaller,
Yep.
do you find that the client analytics reporting has enough detail or information related to the ad creative that caused the failure? Because ideally you would want that data surfaced, in the same like a Conviva, Mux, your client analytics, but it's not. That level of detail is not, and it could be if things were more standardized.
And I'll point that to Casey and Connie then, the two C's. What's stopping, or is the data not there? How could you collect that kind of ad information and have it be pushed through? Is there a location for it?
On the player side, I mean, if it's the issue with the client is always interesting to me in that, like, I'm just spitting back for the most part a lot of stuff that has been already fed to me. So add creative IDs, all that stuff, it comes from the manifest, you know. So yeah, if it's given to us, I can spit it out, and then like, you know, the other stuff of like throughput and, you know, what you're loading and all that kind of stuff that really is being generated by the player is one thing. But yeah, we can spit back everything, and I mean, I think we do. Um, at least everything is wired up on the collection side of things, from our player.
Casey, this is super relevant to the player error codes.
Yeah.
Discussion in SVTA around standardizing their error codes, because basically, I mean, the player is aware of what, like your ID3 tags, your Scuddy markers, whether they're advertised in the manifest or not. The challenge is the analytics systems. Like when I say analytics systems, not the homegrown stuff or the out of band, you know, Adobe Analytics or whatever your player might integrate with, but the Conviva, Mux like QoE analytics plugins aren't aware of creative specific, you know, those creative specific identifiers.
So they can be though. Conviva's done a nice job identifying the ad breaks and where you can get down to the specific slots into the pod, and you can identify some assets. It wasn't integrated fully across Disney. Mostly integrated for ABC and ESPN. So we could use some of that data, but for like Hulu, no shot.
But like the balance is interesting, right? Because look at CMCD version 2. Nico can speak to this. We started with 13 keys in V1. There's 44 keys now. So like, I can give you all the information you want. When is it too much? Because there's a lot there. And by the way, ad IDs are something Nico specifically has made sure are in CMCD version 2. So at least from that perspective, information about the requests and some of these new event mode things that are in there, like we have a content ID that is supposed to represent what the user's seeing on screen at any given time. But it's complex. I mean, you know, a very simple library has turned into quite the undertaking as far as just producing the data in the right format, like, is a tricky thing. And then you got to go wire all this stuff up to the players. So,
and then how real time is that though?
What?
How real time is? Because like I said, I'm gonna need it real time. Like that ad break just happened. I need to know if what ad failed in that break, so that the next ad break we can either turn that ad off or rectify the situation.
So the way I would think about it, if you want that data in real time, is twofold. One is the integration that you referenced with Conviva, like making that more comprehensive. That's the right way to do it, right? Mm-hmm. Conviva has your player buffer health. I'm using Conviva as a proxy for all, like player side QoE. They're going to tell you the state of the client, the brains of the operation. And if you can get that, creative ID and associate it with the player error code, that's kind of the answer you're looking for. And that can be done in fairly real time. But the other option that's probably more complicated or too convoluted is through the CDN logs. But they're going to have to know the file path of the creative, of the ad creative. So like you can do it in real time with the real time CDN logs Connie's talking about, or origin logs, but your ad server logs. But like that's a very kind of brute force way of doing it. It seems like, making the Conviva-like integration a little bit more sophisticated is the way to go. It's pretty close to time, right?
Yeah, getting it from the client is definitely optimal.
John, one of the things you mentioned were player error codes, and the need for standardization. And that reminds me, one of the big challenges that I always had with looking at player QoE data was just how difficult it was to normalize that data. Like first of all, just assessing the general health of the data, sort of knowing what to ignore, like knowing basically what values being reported were just flat out invalid or out of range, right? So cleaning up the data to begin with, and then once you filter it down to actual valid clean data, normalizing across different devices, right? Different platforms. And that, like applies to so many things, like so many types of data. So not just like player error codes, but even like things like, like you have one device reporting that supports HEVC, but the other one reported that supports H.265. And you and I know that's the same thing, right? But of course, like your data analytics backend doesn't know that that's the same thing, right? And so I'm curious, like, how does everyone deal with, data health and normalization, so that when you actually are analyzing the data, it's useful? How does everyone deal with that?
I know it's a problem at Disney because for the ad platforms we support, all the brands, right? And each brand wanted to report the same metric differently, especially in Conviva. Like cleaning up Conviva, I don't know how it was when you before you left, Alex, but cleaning up Conviva metrics was a big job. So the taxonomy is real.
Well, I mean, that was the challenge to work upstream. I mean, I feel for Casey doing the one-off testing right now. I had to do that as well too. We found issues with phantom sessions being created by Roku sticks and the only way you can do it is to literally test it one at a time and then look at the sessions that are coming over. And it was when the difference between hitting the home button while you're in the middle of the player while you're watching a stream versus hitting the back button. And if you hit the back button, the player was able to control it and kind of like shut down the stream properly. You hit the home button, and all of a sudden you got a phantom screen that gets left out there, and it's screwing up data. I think, Alex, to that point, that is a design, product, and engineering kind of cycle that has to happen in order to validate that you've got clean data, so that when you're operationally there, you can have a higher level of confidence that you've done the cleanup and you're actually working on good data.
Yeah.
Like data cleanliness and data normalization, there's kind of the aspect that Sarge is bringing up, which is like, okay, are your metrics accurate, clean, what have you, in your post-reporting? But there's also the idea of normalize, and I don't know if you were getting at both, Alex, or one or the other, but normalizing the data in real time for those real-time applications, because that has its own massive set of data engineering challenges.
Yep.
When you have different data sources and you're trying to land things in a normalized table. And my question, I guess, the way Google thinks about that is a little different in that there's this concept of Spanner, which powers Google search, and most companies don't have that data backend, right? That's one company, 2 or 3 companies in the world have that. For those that don't, like media companies that have very demanding real-time normalization applications, would you be more likely to throw that problem, punt that problem over the fence to an infrastructure and software provider, or to bring that problem in-house to solve? The data engineering aspect of normalization. So like bring in a bunch of logs, bring in a bunch of beacons, you want them to land in a normalized table, you want to do some string manipulations, you want things, you want to clear out duplicate data. That's a very challenging compute heavy service to bring in-house.
Yep.
Back at Paramount, we took the approach of building it in-house first, doing away with it, realizing, okay, we can use a third party, but we need to deploy that third party software on-prem, so the infrastructure challenge, which is the bulk of the challenge, becomes our problem. And essentially you land in a situation where the 20,000-foot view is you just need different data ingestion infrastructure decoupled from your query infrastructure. But either way, it's a big infrastructure like overhead. So how do folks think about that? Like these media companies aren't big data companies.
I run the CDN teams. Right now, it feels like I run the data teams.
Yeah.
And the infra team. Right.
There are like Netflix did their own ClickHouse implementation. They essentially brought the problem in-house, but they have a lot of resources to do that. We explored doing that at Paramount, but it was way too much and landed on I'm a big fan of hydraulics and push their technology, but it basically abstracts a lot of those complexities of ClickHouse for the development team and allows you to deploy it at scale for like analytics. So you can get like Arch kept talking about like all these real-time things. If you throw it at ClickHouse, theoretically that's your answer. But it's a lot to maintain. So then, yeah, the hydraulics has like the hosted solutions now. I don't know of many others. Like Snowflake probably has something similar, but you pay a lot for it. You have to throw money at the problem.
And what about sessionization of data? Like, I mean, in my experience, that was always the most compute intensive part of it, right? Is that like, yeah, you got all these beacons, all these events being sent by the player, right? But ultimately, for a lot of them, right, like they need to be tied into a session, right? So that you can analyze things on a playback session level. And that takes a lot of compute power, right? Because you got to correlate a lot of different data based on IDs. Is that everyone's experience as well? That like that's really kind of the most challenging part of the compute, or are there other challenges?
It's one of them, right? Because we have to connect the data from the control plane, right? So playback service, and then the ad servers entitlements, right? And then down to the media delivery plane.
Mm-hmm.
Now we got players that might be switching CDNs, for example, mid. So now we have tokens in there that can take a session ID, but that now we just, in terms of identifying historically the all the data belongs to that one session, right? We have that increase our compute to be able to identify that a lot more, right? That also increase the complexity of how we identify pirates a lot more.
So, session analysis is super interesting from a complexity and a resource standpoint. So like Connie said, like, okay, if you're concerned with whatever problem you want answered, if you're deciding to answer it by exploring CDN logs, okay, there's CDN switching. So how do you normalize the session ID? I think the answer to that is CMCD. The problem is, because your session ID will remain the same between both CDNs. The problem is not every player is going to report that. And so then you have to use something like a client IP address and a hash of something else, a host name or a token or something like that. And those are going to vary. So the session breaks when the CDN switches.
The fidelity of analysis from the data, it varies, depends on what you're trying to do, right? So a lot of what we're doing right now with all this heavy compute part we spend up to analyze the data, we have to determine, and over time, what is a comfortable threshold.
I think, Connie, one of the questions I've been thinking about as well too is there's a number that you get and you've got a confidence associated with that number of what it is. And you can add another 100,000, 200,000 more data points to that same calculation, and you might only increase the value to be just a little bit more confident. But at what cost was all that done? So what is that minimum amount that gets you to the confidence number that you need to make a decision without overspending just to grab data for the sake of grabbing data?
Yeah, that is one of the hardest challenges. Justifying the cost for minimal gains, and in terms of moving the needle on the metric. Only other point I was going to make about the session ID bit, when it comes to computation of running the queries, right? The way I would think about making the queries more efficient and hence cheaper are really wide tables. So look, at a certain point, it doesn't make sense. Like, you're not going to throw your CDN logs in the same table as your, I don't know, packager logs. Maybe you will, but there's a data engineering trade-off here where if you pile everything into a really wide table, you can run pretty efficient, fast, lightweight queries, filtered on a session ID. The more joins you have to do, the more expensive it's going to become. But oftentimes it makes more sense in terms of data cleanliness and just your data backend to have, more logically decoupled tables. So it's a trade-off. Do you want really fast query performance, or do you want a data model that makes more sense? I would say like having a session ID associated with like any sort of log line or out of band beacon should be the goal. And then combining tables as much as possible to do with the least amount of joints should be a design goal. It's just hard to achieve.
So we have just 13 more minutes, and we've been talking about data and a lot of different angles. You also mentioned a couple of new standards. You mentioned CMCD v2. You mentioned Common Error Codes, Alex, which I know you like. If you were to say one big challenge nowadays in media, like what do you think the biggest challenge is towards data, and also where you think there's a big opportunity? What would you people say? Like, and please don't say money.
Can I say my biggest challenge is merger or splits or acquisition?
What is it again? Sorry.
My biggest challenge right now is merger or splits or acquisition.
You got to bring the data back to the business to prove WBD should stay WBD, right?
I have to figure out how I'm gonna split the consumptions and storage of all of that data for the splits.
But would a
Just cut the
standard
hard drives in
help you?
half. Everyone gets a half hard drive.
Yeah, definitely.
I could
All the odd and even sessions.
at least from the at least from the player side, the one that it goes back to what I was saying earlier about balance, because like you talk about CMCD v2 and you talk about error codes. Error codes have been going on for 18 months now, and finding the balance of, I want to know that this decoder, errored out on this particular frame, and it's like, okay, so do we want QoE data or do we want debug data? Because they're two very, very different things. And then the same thing in CMCD is that, yeah, as the player developer, I can give you any piece you want, but when is it too much? When are we just spamming you with stuff? And I'm going through that right now with all my test runs, is that I never seem to have enough data when I need it, and when I don't need it, I have way too much. And I don't know if there's a good answer for any of that. But that's my particular challenge.
Love it.
Well, I'll take a really quick answer. I don't know. To answer your question, I don't know. But what I find personally most interesting, which is my, it's more based on level of interest, is the piracy question. I think I just find it really fascinating to be able to look for needles in a haystack in mass amounts of aggregate data, and like piracy or whack-a-mole type scenarios provide that opportunity. So I just find it interesting, but I don't think that's necessarily the biggest I don't know, opportunity or trend or anything like that. I just find it cool.
I think like when we look towards the future, like everything you guys touched on covered at the main core or a good chunk of it. But like what is really interesting is, the volume of data we're starting to get is just continuing to grow. There's big costs and challenges as we balance that, but there's still a ton more potentially coming. I was talking with the guys from Telestream out at the Streaming Media Conference, and they're starting to do a bunch more where they're actually doing a lot of data generation from video real time, and it's all it's not just the basics of sentiment anymore, but it's going deeper into object and really what's going on, a lot deeper, a lot more rich data, which is going to be really powerful for things like advertising and other areas as well. But it's a shit ton of data when you think about that, how much we have going through. So how are we going to deal with this data and use it, because it can be so powerful, but at what point is it just going to get too much and just such a big cost implication for us?
Okay, please someone go on. And David, we hope you're alive. That's because you aren't having your mate. Sarge,
Okay, now he
any
might
thoughts you want to share here? Oh, there you go. Now you're live. Oh, you're muted, I think. David. Nope, you're still muted somehow.
It was just me being a smart ass. I probably shouldn't repeat it.
We're just happy you're alive.
Thank you.
My thoughts are, I kind of agree with everyone here. I don't know what the solution is. The other part of the problem that Casey was kind of alluding to, when you get too much data, you get analysis paralysis, right? So it's way too much. I also like Sean. I think you had a good point about how much normalization do you do to your tables, because normalizing is what you're taught to do, makes it easier to read, but you definitely want the system to run faster, and using a wide table will definitely help. One of the things we talked about is how do you aggregate all the data from the different data stores into a single point so that you can run some type of tool, whether it be a GPT or some other AI related tool that will help you do the analysis in real time. And then there's also the human cost. That's one of the things that we haven't really talked about, is the human cost, because you need somebody to sit there, either run the queries or perform the analysis. And oftentimes it's going to be someone who's either in the fire and they got a million things to be doing and not really want to worry about the numbers crunching part of it. So those are some of the bullets that were going in my mind.
Interesting.
See, we should all pat ourselves on the back for not diving down the AI rabbit hole in a data discussion right away.
It was too
This was
So,
We're too practical.
I'm still expecting Babesh to come with his SVTA AI hat and tell us AI. So we're gonna leave you.
Not for this conversation. I think that people using GPTs and generative text development or whatnot, it's no one's training unless if they are, they're doing it in house.
Mhm.
They're not talking to anybody about it. None of this stuff is public,
Right.
and they're trying to train it on patterns within the data to look at and find it, etc. And that's going to be much harder than doing send a bunch of logs up to ChatGPT, or do it by API call to OpenAI or Gemini or whatnot, and to say analyze this, because you're not going to get the data back for like a minute or two. It's not fast.
Mhm.
You can have it do a perfect report after the fact, but you need something that's trained for speed. It's got to be lightweight. It's got to have light inference, and that means that you're leaning more toward not a GPT to do that. You need some other kind of machine learning
Yeah.
algorithm.
Yeah.
I want to seed this idea that we've toyed around. I think Bavesh, you and I have talked about it. We've talked about it in SVTA and amongst others a few times. But there's basically this dichotomy between large language models and your homegrown trained models, your small language models. Gemini, ChatGPT, these are great. They're never going to be trained on your CDN logs or your player data. It's just not. It's fundamentally not how they're trained. And so to answer the data science questions or AI questions that we want answered, like how can we predict rebuffering, how can we find a pirate or surface an anomaly or what have you, every media company either needs to train their own models behind their own closed data sets, or if there's a common set of challenges that the industry is facing, we should work on a streaming media model which is trained on CDN log data, which is trained on video player data, which is trained on transcode data. And then we can actually benefit as an industry in answering a lot of these questions. There's no reason each and every individual media company that cares about these should train their own models or be limited to the deficiencies of a Gemini or a ChatGPT for these particular questions.
That was actually a very good summer project.
That does sound like a good summer project. The only caveat I would say is, and I agree with you, it needs to be a standards-based approach so that everyone can share in it. And I think you also throw in IAB in there somewhere for ad specific data. But at some point in time, your data is your data, and you're going to still have some special sauce in your data that you're going to need to train on. So yeah, it's definitely, as an industry, I think we definitely need something where we can train something large, especially to protect against piracy. That seems like a no-brainer, and that everyone can get on board with. But then I do think still in-house, you're going to still do some training on your special sauce.
Excellent. Connie, what are your last comments? Because I know you're gonna go for a very important meeting
No.
afterwards.
It's about what you guys are talking about. We want to use AI, right? It is on the horizon, but the challenge right now, whether we are doing it the special sauce that I cannot have more, or we use AI, is right now is the fidelity or confidence that we can have, right?
Mhm.
So the action that we take upon those results is actually correct, right? Because in our world, right, that's direct impact to user playback experience, right? Yeah. And everything else that people already talked about. Yeah. So I don't need to repeat myself. Yeah.
Thanks. Any
If you
final comments?
have any question for Alex, I'm happy to answer as well.
Yes.
Sorry.
I'm not
Direct all
asking
your
Alex
questions to
because
me, to Connie.
Alex said he was deriving all his answers to Connie.
I'm delegating.
Delegating, yeah. So I don't know if you have any final comments. Anyone? I don't want to leave anyone without anyone in the audience that want to jump in.
Cool.
Come on, get off mute.
Come on, we have 2 more minutes. So as usual, this 1 hour for the Mata talk is never enough. Like there's a lot to continue talking about, but that's also part of the idea. We had a lot of discussions about data in 2025, and AI was only named probably 4 or 5 times. So I'm very proud of you all. A lot of QoE information, a lot of QoE discussions, a lot about real-time information and real-time decisioning for QoE, for debugging, for triage, for anti-piracy. And also some discussions in the chat and our conversation about mergers. So maybe we should do a Mata talk about war stories about M&A.
Can we do that? Like maybe a summer camp or something?
That would be awesome. But that has to be like a
So
3-hour
Connie's saying we need to
session.
be drinking
Yeah, about
something
this
harder
is a
than
bar
mate
game.
when we have that conversation.
Yeah, I'm hoping I want that one recorded.
And eating.
Yeah.
So we're going to do that one in person in Uruguay, but we're not recording. So no one, and it has to be with alcohol. I totally agree that mate is not enough for that conversation. But I'm going to invite over Sophia, that she's a psychologist. So she's also going to do some therapist, like act as a therapist for all of us.
Oh, you first say you're gonna invite over Sophie. I was like, wait, HR's gonna be in the house.
No HR and M&A. No. Sophie offered.
I was just going to say on the M&A front, I was curious to get Casey and Connie talking why WBDs told Ellison to kick rocks, but